So, today we're going to dive into a really powerful story about education that honestly has nothing to do with curriculum or test scores. It's all about the incredible, life changing impact of empathy. And it all starts when a school vice principal comes face to face with a child's deep, unshakable fear. This quote, it really gets to the very heart of this story, doesn't it? It's such a simple but crucial reminder that behind every student, behind every single behavior, there's a whole personal journey that we just can't see. So, what happens when an educator finally chooses to look for that invisible story? Well, that's what we're about to find out. All right, so let's meet the heart of our story, a young boy named Kumar. For him, a fear of school wasn't just some phase he was going through, it was a deep seated terror that all started with one single traumatic event. You know, it's crazy to think about, but it all goes back to grade 1. A teacher punished him physically. And that one moment, that was enough to completely shatter his sense of safety and plant this seed of terror that would just grow and grow for years. And this timeline, wow, it just lays bare how deep this trauma went. This wasn't a brief thing. After that incident in first grade, his parents fought a daily battle for 2 full years just to get him to go to school. So by the time he enrolled in a new school for third grade, that fear was still just as raw as ever. This is where things start to change. The school's vice principal decides to step in. But her approach, it was completely unconventional. She basically threw the rulebook out the window and decided to focus entirely on human connection and making him feel safe. And this right here, this just perfectly sums up her whole philosophy. For a kid who is just gripped by fear, rules and discipline are only going to make it worse, right? They're just more sources of anxiety. What he needed first wasn't structure, it was safety. So she started by building this foundation of pure reassurance. This was the very first promise she made to Kumar. I mean, think about how powerful this is. In an instant, it gave him back a sense of control. The very place he was terrified of now had an escape route, and that simple promise began to dismantle that awful feeling of being trapped. Okay, so then she makes a second promise, and this one takes it even a step further. It removed all academic pressure. Suddenly, school wasn't a place of demands and expectations anymore. It was a place where he could just be and feel calm. She was systematically breaking down the link between school and stress. And then, this. This was the moment everything changed. With this one sentence, the vice principal completely reframed her role. She wasn't some authority figure to be feared. She was a protector. The source material says that for the very first time, Kumar looked at her not with fear, but with curiosity. The wall of terror was finally breached. So once that foundation of safety and trust was finally in place, something really beautiful started to happen. Kumar's mind, which had been slammed shut by fear, slowly, gradually started to open again. I mean, just look at this. The comparison couldn't be more stark, right? The child who showed up every single morning with tears and anxiety became a student who actually participated, who was learning, and who even started to smile at school. The change was total. And it wasn't achieved through force, but through trust. And get this, academically, he soared. He actually got an A1 grade. But here's the thing, and this is so important. The grade was never the point. The vice principal herself says this. The real victory was restoring a child's trust in the world around him. Okay, so Kumar's story it's incredibly moving on its own. But it's also more than that. It's a powerful case study for a much bigger idea about what it really means to be an educator. It's about being so much more than just a teacher. The source material gives us this amazing term for it, emotional architect. Think about that for a second. An educator isn't just delivering information. They are actively constructing or deconstructing a child's inner world, their confidence, their fundamental sense of safety. And what's so telling here? Look at this list. None of these are about math or science or history, are they? They're all about creating that psychological safety net that allows learning to happen in the first place. It shows how an educator literally shapes a child's entire perception of the world as either a safe place to explore or a dangerous place to fear. And that's where this whole story really comes back to us. Because whether you're a teacher, a parent, or really anyone who interacts with kids, Kumar's story forces us to ask some pretty important questions about how we respond to their behavior. So first, let's just ask ourselves this. When a child is resisting, when they're pushing back, do we just see defiance? Or do we look a little deeper for that invisible story, for the silent fear that might be driving everything? And that leads to this, a really crucial shift in perspective. It's so easy to just label a behavior as defiance, but what if we made a conscious choice to see it as a signal of distress instead? How would our entire response change? And finally, it all comes down to our methods, doesn't it? Is our first instinct to impose rules and assert authority? Or is it to connect, to understand, and to guide with empathy? The vice principal's success just shows the incredible power of choosing that second path. You know, when you boil it all down, it can be as simple as this. We so often forget just how much power we have. For a child who's lost in fear, one single reassuring adult can become the anchor that brings them all the way back to safety. So I want to leave you with this final profound thought. It really redefines the whole purpose of education. Before we can ever hope to fill a mind with knowledge, we first have to make sure that the heart feels safe enough to learn. That, right there, is the true architecture of empathy.